Good morning, everyone. My talk today is about online assessment strategies. Obviously, this is because of the COVID 19 pandemic. It's not really practical to have face to face sessions with our students. So, we are going to pivot to a technology that's been around for quite a while, but has gotten more attention because of the pandemic. Okay, so what is online assessment? Well, online assessment is the use of information technology in assessment. So it's still assessment. The goal is the same, to measure student learning. But we are going to be using computers and the internet in helping us assess our students' learning. Let me show you some examples of websites that specialize in online assessment. You have Class Marker, ProProfs, and FlexiQuiz. I could easily have shown you dozens more of these websites. They are very common on the internet, and all of these sites have their own strengths and weaknesses. And your choice of one over the other will really depend on your own needs. Different subjects will have different requirements, and even individual teachers have their own preferences. I'll do a guided tour later to show you how to use it. You may also want to try the other websites to see if they suit your needs. Why use online assessment? Aside from minimizing the spread of the Wuhan virus, what benefits do we gain from implementing online assessment? So let's talk about the advantages of online assessment. There are several advantages from using online assessment. Let me show you each one. Okay, number one, it is environmentally friendly. What do we mean by this? Well, traditional paper and pencil assessment makes a lot of use of paper, ink, and a lot of other inputs. And that is going to put a strain on the environment. Well, with online assessment, you don't have to use as much. Now, I'm not saying that online assessment doesn't use any resources. Of course it does. The computers need to be built. That uses resources. The computers also need electricity to run. That uses up resources. The internet also has to be built and has to be using electricity. That is also a resource use. But the thing with the information technology is the more people that use it, the more economical it is per person. Because I'll give you an example. If you are going to test one person in the traditional pen and paper, it may cost X. So if you're going to test 100 people in the traditional assessment, it will probably cost 100x, maybe 99x, 98x. But it's going to increase as you add more people. So maybe if you want to test 1,000 people, it will be costing 1,000 x. But in online assessment, the more people that you are testing, it doesn't really matter that number. The amount of resources that you're going to use is almost the same. So maybe it will cost X to test one person. To test 1,000 person, it may cost 1.5x. Not a lot of increase. That's what we mean by being environmentally friendly. Number two, it is technologically forward. What do we mean by this? Well, it's a fact that our world is increasingly dominated by technology. This is the world that our students will step into when they finish schooling. And the modern job market will favor people who are adept in the use of digital tools. So, by exposing them to these tools early, we are preparing them to move forward into a world of technology. We are preparing them for the future. And that's a good thing. Number three, it produces labor cost reduction. All right, this should be easy enough to understand. When we implement pen and paper assessment, we have so much labor involved. For teachers, they have to set up the test area. They have to ensure that all students receive enough copies of the test and so many other things. For administrators, they have to organize proctors and schedule the tests. When we use online assessment, this removes a lot of these procedures. So you don't have to spend so much labor costs. And the institution implementing the online assessment will actually benefit from this. Number four, it produces time saving. Well, exam week is a very hectic time for teachers. You have to make exams, then you have to check the exams, and sometimes you even have to analyze the exams. That is a significant time investment by teachers. And not just time, but also emotional investment. This can be a very frustrating time for teachers. In my experience, so many teachers sacrifice entire weekends and even more just to rush checking the exams. Well, with online assessment, we can automate a lot of these things so that you don't have to spend so much time in this one particular part of the educational process. So then you are freed up to have more time to devote to other things like TikTok. Not TikTok, but other more important things. Now that we have talked about the benefits of online assessment, let's take a look about the downsides. What are the disadvantages of online assessment? Number one, open book exams. In online assessment, essentially our exams are open book exams. There is no way for us to go to all of our students' houses or internet cafes to check that they don't open books or look at other websites or use apps. We cannot do that. It's not practical. So all of our exams are open book exams. So the typical questions like, when did the Philippines implement the Clean Air Act? Well, that is just a Google away. It's very easy for students to get those information. So we have to stay away from those. If you're a teacher that likes to pepper students with these kinds of questions, you have to adapt. You really cannot do this anymore. Google is a reality. Students do not have to memorize so many facts. The important thing is, do they understand how to apply these things? Do they understand the content? That's the important thing. And actually, this may be a disadvantage because we cannot ask those kinds of questions. But those kinds of questions are not even that good, even in my time. I remember having to memorize like all the phylums, all the phyla under a certain kingdom, and maybe it forced my mind to be better at memorizing things. But again, like most students say today, there is Google for that. We have apps for that. Okay, teach us how to understand things, how to reason with things. That's the most important thing. So this can actually be not a disadvantage, but it may actually force us to change our way of asking students questions. So yes, it's a disadvantage because it's an open book exam every time we have online assessment. But I think in the long run, it will train us to be better question test makers. Number two, onboarding onto new technology. Okay, what do we mean? Well, onboarding means we have to become familiar, we have to become used to this technology because it is new. Well, actually, it's not that new. Um, Most of you here are below 40, I hope. And you should already be somewhat familiar with these new technologies. This reminds me of an interview of Steve Jobs when they were making the first Apple computers. And one of the problems they had was, somebody told him, "Hey, Steve, how are we going to convince people to buy our products when a lot of them don't like to use the keyboard because the keyboard was the way to interact with the computers at that time." And so what Steve Jobs said was that it took them a lot of time to try to figure out how to make this as user friendly as possible. But he said, eventually I figured out that death will solve this. And what he meant, it's that it's not a very elegant way to say this, but yes, eventually people who are not using the new technology will die, and they will leave behind people who are used to the technology. I mean, today's children are so used to technology that the old technology puzzles them. I remember my nephew when he was just a couple of months old. I would give him my iPad, and he would figure out how to do it. How to manipulate the thing to make it do the things that he likes. And after a while, he was, as they say, a digital native, right? And one day, I saw him trying to interact with an actual magazine, and it seemed something strange to him because he was trying to swipe the pictures, and he got frustrated because he didn't know that he had to turn the pages. And so that's what you should have today. All the old people who did not know how to use the technology have already died. Well, some are still around, but they're very, very old. They are not involved anymore. They're retired. So, having said that, there are nuances to technology, right? It doesn't mean that you know how to use Facebook, then you know how to use the other kinds of technology. But you can use what you know about Facebook, about TikTok, about all these popular technologies that you know to kind of give you a ramp into this new technology. I think somebody said that Edmodo looks like a Facebook page. And so if you know how to use Facebook, then you can probably use Edmodo. And same thing with online assessment. You are not completely foreign to this. You have the advantage. When I was in high school, the first time I saw and actually touched a computer was when I was in my fourth year, and we were being taught MS-DOS. Those computers, they did not have any graphical user interface. You had to type in every command, and that's how I was introduced to technology, and it was very foreign to me. I had to ask a lot of questions, but eventually I got it done. So there will be a learning curve to this transition. It's a new technology, but as we make some mistakes, we will gain skills that hopefully flatten the learning curve. It's a very well-known phrase today because of the pandemic, but the learning curve can also be flattened by investing time and money in onboarding our students, teachers, and administrators. And hopefully, My contribution, this talk, will also help with that, with your cooperation, of course. Number three, infrastructural barriers. Well, we live in a country where our infrastructure is not very good. I mean, our internet speeds um, are very low. The availability is problematic. The electricity is come and go, and so many other issues we have to deal with in this country. Uh, I used to teach in Dubai for a few years, and in my entire 3 years of teaching there, I think we experienced a brownout that lasted for probably 5 minutes, only twice in the entire 3 years. And those were probably because maybe a transformer went down or something like that, and there was never any like scheduled brownouts like Casareco subjects us to. And not to criticize our country, it's a reality that we have to deal with. And I think so many studies have shown that we have the most expensive uh, internet in the world. Well, if it's not the most expensive, one of the most expensive. Also the same with electricity. Again, in Dubai, electricity is so cheap that if I remember correctly, our monthly bill for electricity on a small apartment was basically like 500 pesos or less. And in the Philippines, again, in a small house, it's like 5 times that at least. And in the summer, it spikes because of the obviously you have to use a lot of air conditioning. But anyway, we have problems in our country. Um, our students might be hardworking, our teachers may be also hardworking, but we will run into these problems. And this is probably why we don't have a widespread use of online assessment and other kinds of technologies. Um, the reality is that it's very tough to do. I guess we are being forced into this because of the COVID 19 pandemic. I mean, we wouldn't be doing this if not for the COVID 19. We would still be doing our status quo. But now we are being forced into it. We have to face the reality. There is a saying, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Well, in the Philippines, the spirit is willing, but the Wi Fi is slow. The spirit is willing, but there is a brownout. We have to implement our assessment tools with these limitations in mind. So that is a definite drawback. We have to suffer these things, but again, we have no choice. We will have to do what is needed. We have to make do with what we have. Okay, so one concern I often hear a lot about regarding online assessment is cheating. Teachers want to make sure that students are not able to cheat, because obviously this invalidates the educational process. So while we can never totally eliminate cheating in education, there are a lot of ways that we can minimize and discourage instances of cheating. So let's talk about them. Okay, number one, begin test with university policy on academic honesty. So why do this? There have been several studies that have proved that reminders like this can significantly reduce cheating. So What you can do is before the student takes the test, they will see a reminder of the school's policy on academic honesty and reminders about the penalties that they can incur if they are caught cheating. So, this may not deter the super hardcore cheaters or, future members of Congress, but it's worth a try. I mean, uh, the more students are reminded of what is at stake, the more likely that they will not cheat at all. Number two, avoid recall or memory questions. Well, like we talked about, all exams are now open book exams. The typical questions of rote memorization, they don't really work anymore. They can easily Google the answer. They may have apps. They can even ask other classmates for the answer. And the simpler the answer, the easier it is to spread among students. So now we have to shift to more complex questions and therefore complex answers. More analysis or synthesis types of questions. Number three, randomize question order. Well, in an online exam, it's very easy for students to cheat by asking other classmates, like what's the answer in number five? Well, if we randomize the question order, it makes it harder to cheat. Now they have to actually ask the entire question instead of saying just the number of the question. And the more obstacles we can place in front of the student, the less willing and able they are to cheat. And again, just remember, we will never stop all cheating, but we can make it harder on them. Number four, randomize the options within a question. So we can slow down student cheating another way by scrambling the order of the options in a question. So for example, one student may see that letter C is the correct answer in his exam, but another student will have letter D as the correct answer, and another student may have letter A as the correct answer. And again, if they are really determined to cheat, they can compare their exams and eventually figure out. But this will take even more time. And the more we slow them down, the less they are able to cheat. Number five, display one question at a time. So, another way that students can cheat is for them to screen capture the questions and then send it to their group chats to crowdsource the correct answers. And we make it easier for them to cheat if we have multiple questions on a single page. So they may see 10 questions in one page. And so they can send all of that. But if we have only one question per page, they have to screen capture every single question, which again is not impossible, but slows them down even more. So they have to overcome that if they really want to cheat. Number six, prohibit backtracking. So, related to the previous strategy of having only one question per page, preventing backtracking means they have to answer each question before they can move on to the next. And that will make it so much harder for them to cheat. Number seven, add a time limit. Give students enough time and they will find a way to cheat. So we take that away from them by putting them under time pressure. The reason for the other strategies that we discussed is to make cheating more time consuming. When we make cheating more complicated, then the time limit forces students to be honest about taking the exam, because otherwise they might fail if they take so much time when they are scrambling to cheat. Number 8, limit test availability. Again, another time constraint. We want to be considerate to our students and give them enough time to take the exam and account for problems like brownouts, computer crashes, and other problems. But if we give them too much time, there is a greater chance that they will find a way to cheat. For example, giving them a 2-hour window to take the test may drastically cut down on the chances of students circulating the exam amongst themselves. But this is not a good idea because it leaves students vulnerable to any internet or power problems. If Casoreco schedules a 12-hour brownout, some students may not be able to take the test at all. Or maybe their internet connection becomes unreliable for the 2-hour window. Or maybe their computer crashes. So many things can go wrong. On the other hand, giving students a 1-month window means they have so much time to figure out a way to game our leniency. I usually give my students a 3-day window. I think it gives them some wiggle room for any unforeseen problems, but it's not too long that they are going to find it easy to cheat. Number 9, minimize feedback to students. When students answer tests, they often like to get feedback immediately after completing the test. Because obviously, if you failed or if you passed or if you got a good grade, you'd want to know it immediately. Well, online testing have features that allow students to get immediate feedback. The problem is, if we give our students feedback like this, they may use that information to let other students cheat. If they find out that they got number 9, number 10, number 12, number 14 wrong, then it's easier for the other students to figure out what is the right answer. So, as much as we want to help our students with feedback, we should try to minimize it, especially if there is a great risk of them being able to figure out certain questions. Number 10, use a question bank. Using a question bank with hundreds, sometimes thousands of prepared questions means that we can make each exam unique to the student. They can't cheat by asking their classmates since they have a different set of questions. For example, if we have a question bank of 500 questions, we can make 50-item exams for each student, and they will likely be composed of a different set of questions. However, professional data-based question banks often require payment. So the alternative is for teachers to pool their own questions and create their own question bank. Over time, a school can grow its own question bank. Okay, so I promised a guided tour of an online assessment website, so here we are. I will now demo